I phoned my parents after my husband's death. We're busy at your sister's birthday, they replied. Days later they arrived demanding half of the inheritance. My 8-year-old handed them an envelope and asked if that's why they came. When they opened it, their hands trembled. The kettle was still whistling when I dropped the phone. I hadn't even poured the tea. My hands were trembling not from the heat, but from the voice I'd just heard. My mother's voice, cheerful, distracted, and completely detached. We're busy at your sister's birthday, she'd said as if I'd called to chat about cake flavors. I stood there in my kitchen, the morning light spilling across the counter, and felt something inside me go quiet. Not broken. Just quiet. I had called to tell them that my husband was gone. That the man who'd held my hand through every storm had taken his last breath in the middle of the night. That our son had woken up to silence and a mother who couldn't find words. But they were busy. Celebrating. Laughing. Toasting another year of my sister's life while mine had just split in two. I didn't call back. I didn't text. I sat at the kitchen table staring at the untouched tea and waited for something, anything. A message. A knock. A sign that they cared. But the hours passed and the silence grew louder. My son, just 8, came into the room and asked, "Did Grandma say she's coming?" I smiled, the kind of smile you wear when you don't want your child to see the cracks. "Not yet," I said. He nodded and went back to his coloring book. The next day neighbors came by with casseroles and flowers. Friends from church dropped off cards and hugs. My parents? Nothing. I checked my phone obsessively, hoping maybe they'd left a voicemail. All I found were photos. My sister had posted pictures of her birthday party. Balloons, champagne, smiling faces. My mother was in the background, laughing, holding a gift bag. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. The funeral was set for Saturday. I didn't expect much, but I still hoped. I wore black not just for mourning but for armor. My son clung to my hand, his little suit too big for his frame. The chapel filled slowly. Friends, colleagues, even my husband's old college roommate flew in. I scanned the crowd. No sign of my parents. No sign of my sister. Just more silence. As the service began, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not peace, just clarity. I stood at the podium, read the eulogy I'd written at 3 a.m., and looked out at the faces that had shown up. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I had cried enough in the days before. Now I was just watching. After the burial, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my funeral dress, and stared at the wall. My son came in holding a drawing. "It's Daddy in the sky," he said. I took it, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "He'd love it." He climbed into my lap and asked, "Will Grandma come tomorrow?" I didn't answer. I just held him close. A week passed. The house was quiet except for the occasional ring of the doorbell. One afternoon my aunt arrived. She didn't stay long. Just handed me an envelope and said, "They'll be coming soon." I opened it after she left. Inside was a note from my mother. No condolences. No mention of the funeral. Just one line, "We'll visit next week. We need to discuss the inheritance." I sat down slowly, the letter trembling in my hands. My husband hadn't even been gone 2 weeks. His clothes were still in the closet. His toothbrush still sat by the sink. And they were already thinking about money. I looked at the note again, then at the photo of him on the mantel. "I won't let them do this," I whispered. That night I tucked my son into bed. He looked up at me and asked, "Are they coming to take Daddy's things?" I paused. "Why do you think that?" He shrugged. "Because they didn't come when he was gone. But now they want to come." I didn't know what to say. So I just hugged him tight. After he fell asleep, I went to the study and opened the file cabinet. I pulled out every document. Wills, insurance papers, bank statements. I made calls. I spoke to lawyers. I asked questions I never thought I'd need to ask. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for truth. In the days that followed, I found strength in the routine. I cooked. I cleaned. I helped my son with homework. But every night I returned to that folder. I read every line. I made copies. I highlighted clauses. I wasn't angry. I was focused. One morning I received a call from the lawyer. "Everything is in order," he said. "Your husband made it very clear. The estate belongs to you and your son." I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence. I felt something shift. Not relief. Not victory. Just readiness. I placed the documents in a new envelope and tucked it into the drawer. My son watched me. "Is that for Grandma?" he asked. I nodded. "It's for all of them." He tilted his head. "Will they be mad?" I smiled. "Maybe. But we're not doing anything wrong." He thought for a moment, then said, "Can I give it to them?" I paused. "Why?" He shrugged. "Because I want to know if that's why they came." I looked at him. This little boy who had lost so much, yet still carried so much wisdom. "Yes," I said. "You can." And just like that, the plan was set. Not for revenge. Not for drama. But for truth. For dignity. For the love of a man who had given us everything. And the promise that we wouldn't let anyone take it away. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 p.m. I had been expecting it, but the sound still made me flinch. My son looked up from his puzzle on the floor, his eyes wide. I walked to the door slowly, heart steady, mind sharper than it had been in weeks. When I opened it, I saw them. My parents standing side by side, dressed like they were headed to a boardroom. Mom wore a beige blazer over a silk blouse, her pearl necklace gleaming in the sunlight. Dad had on a navy suit, the kind he used to wear to court back when he practiced law. He held a leather folder under his arm. Neither of them smiled. They stepped inside without hesitation, barely glancing at the house that still smelled faintly of lilies from the funeral. My son stood up and walked over. "Hi, Grandma," he said softly. She bent down and gave him a quick hug, stiff and brief. Dad patted his head like he was greeting a neighbor's dog. Then they sat down at the dining table, the same one where my husband and I used to eat dinner together every night. "We need to talk about the estate," Dad said, placing the folder on the table. His voice was firm, rehearsed. I nodded, keeping my tone even. "Of course." He opened the folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. It was handwritten, neat and numbered. "We've listed the items we believe should be divided fairly," he said. I leaned forward and read the list. Furniture. Jewelry. Stocks. Even the car. Mom chimed in, "It's only fair. We're family." I didn't respond. I let them speak. My son sat nearby, watching quietly. His eyes moved from their faces to mine, searching for something familiar. But they weren't the people he remembered. They weren't the people I remembered either. Dad continued, "We know he had investments. We'd like to see the portfolio." Mom added, "And the life insurance. He had a policy, didn't he?" I folded my hands on the table. "He did," I said. "Everything is documented." They exchanged a glance, satisfied. "Good," Dad said. "We'll need copies." My son stood up. He didn't say anything. He walked to the cabinet near the fireplace, opened the drawer and pulled out a small envelope. He walked back to the table and placed it in front of my father. "Is this why you came?" he asked. The room went silent. My parents froze. Dad looked at the envelope, then at me. I nodded. "Go ahead. Open it." His fingers trembled as he peeled it open. Inside was a copy of my husband's will. I had made sure it was clear, legal, and binding. Everything, every asset, every account, every possession, was left to me and our son. No clauses. No conditions. No room for debate. Dad read it slowly. Mom leaned over his shoulder, her lips pressed into a thin line. When he reached the end, he looked up, stunned. "He didn't leave anything for us?" Mom whispered. I met her eyes. "He did," I said. "He left you the choice to be here for us. You didn't take it." Dad's face flushed. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "We raised you," he said, voice rising. "We deserve something." I stood too, calm but firm. "You raised me." "Yes. But you didn't show up when I needed you most. Not when he passed. Not at the funeral. Not even a phone call." Mom tried to speak, but I held up a hand. "You made your priorities clear. You chose a party over your daughter's grief. Now I'm choosing mine." Dad's jaw clenched. "This is about punishment." "No," I said. "It's about truth." He looked at my son, who was now standing beside me, holding my hand. "You're teaching him to shut out family." "I'm teaching him to protect what's his," I replied. "To recognize love from obligation." Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "We didn't know how to help." "You didn't try," I said. "And now you're here for things. Not for us." The silence stretched. Dad picked up the folder, folded the list and tucked it away. We'll leave, he said. I walked them to the door. No hugs. No promises. Just distance. As they stepped outside, Mom turned back. We thought we mattered. I looked at her steady. You did. But you chose not to show it. She nodded slowly. Then they walked away. I closed the door and leaned against it. My son tugged my sleeve. Are they mad? I knelt down. Maybe. But we did the right thing. He hugged me tight. Daddy would be proud. I smiled, finally letting the weight settle. Yes, I whispered. He would. I stood at the door long after it closed, listening to the silence that followed. It wasn't the kind that made you feel alone. It was the kind that made you feel safe. My son tugged gently at my sleeve. Are they coming back? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked down at him, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead and said, Not for a while. He nodded, satisfied with the answer, and went back to his puzzle. The house felt different. Lighter. Like someone had opened a window and let out years of stale air. I walked through each room slowly, touching the back of chairs, the edge of picture frames, the corner of the dining table. Everything was still in its place, but something had shifted. It wasn't just the absence of my parents. It was the presence of something stronger. I had protected my home, my child, and my husband's memory. And for the first time in weeks I felt steady. That night, after my son had fallen asleep, I sat in the study with a cup of tea and opened the drawer where my husband kept his journals. I hadn't touched them since the funeral. The leather cover was worn, the pages slightly curled. I flipped through slowly, reading bits and pieces, grocery lists, notes about work, sketches of garden layouts. Then I found it. A folded letter tucked between 2 pages. My name written in his handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. My hands weren't trembling, but my heart was. Inside he had written about love. About trust. About knowing who truly stood by us. You'll know who's real, he wrote. And you'll know what to do. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't cry, not from sadness anyway. I cried because I had honored his words. I had stood my ground. I had chosen truth over comfort. And he had known I would. The next morning, I placed the letter in a small box along with our wedding photo and the drawing our son had made for the funeral. I didn't want to hide it, I wanted to preserve it. It wasn't just a message. It was a reminder. It on the mantel. It sat beside the box with the letter, the drawing, and the wedding photo. I looked at it often, not to remember what we lost but to honor what we found. We had survived. We had chosen love over resentment. Truth over silence. And in that photo, our hands didn't tremble. 3 days later, my sister showed up unannounced. I saw her through the window, standing on the porch with her arms crossed, her shoulders hunched. I opened the door slowly. She looked tired. Not physically, emotionally. Like someone who had been carrying a weight she didn't understand. I didn't know they were going to do that, she said before I could speak. They told me you were being dramatic. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where my parents had laid out their list. She looked around, then down at her hands. I thought they were just coming to check on you, she said. I didn't know it was about money. I didn't say anything. I let her talk. They always made me feel like I had to be perfect, she continued. Like I had to earn their love every day. I didn't realize what that meant for you. I nodded slowly. You were the favorite. But I was the fallback. She winced. I'm sorry. We sat in silence for a while. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo. It was of the 2 of us as kids sitting on the swings in our backyard. I found this last week, she said. I thought you should have it. I took it, studied it. We looked happy, carefree. Before expectations. Before comparisons. We didn't fix everything, I said. No, she replied. But maybe we can start. I didn't promise anything. But I didn't shut the door either. A month later I sold the house. It wasn't a hard decision. The rooms were too big, the memories too loud. I found a smaller place near my son's school. A cozy 2-bedroom with a little yard and a picket fence. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I started working part-time at the local library. The hours were flexible, the people kind. I shelved books, helped kids with homework, and found comfort in the quiet. My son made new friends. He joined a soccer team. He laughed more. Slept better. We planted a garden together. Tomatoes, basil, sunflowers. Every morning we watered the soil and watched things grow. I didn't need luxury. I needed peace. And every day I found a little more of it. On his 9th birthday we spent the morning in the garden. He wore a blue shirt with a tiny stain on the collar and held a small frame with his dad's picture. I wore a sundress I hadn't worn in years. We stood side by side smiling, not for anyone else but for ourselves. The neighbor offered to take a photo. I handed her my phone and wrapped my arm around my son. He held the frame close to his chest. The sun was warm, the breeze gentle. The shutter clicked. Later that evening I printed the photo in place. They held on. Firm and steady.